Michelle and James sat on the couch. Michelle was crying and James sat quietly beside her. In his mind, he was thinking why Michelle can't open up to me. I'm her man. She always does silly things that cause unnecessary arguments. I don't know how much more I can cope with this life. Jim turns to Michelle and asked her, why don't you talk to me? Michelle stood there not saying anything. Michelle in her head sobs to herself. Why can't I stop crying? I need to talk to Jim, but I am afraid if I tell him everything, he may leave me and never come back, and I really love him dearly. In the past, this same thing had caused me to lose some very good men, and I really don't want to lose Jim. He means the world and all to me. Jim thought went back to the day he met Michelle. He said, I could recall that faithful Thursday evening when I met Michelle at the money transfer in Southwest London. She appears to be happy. While I was at the teller, I said something to the teller and she found it very funny. She was laughing. I waited outside the shop for her. As soon as I saw her, I said hi. She said hello between laughing. Then she said that was very funny in the shop. Where did you get that good sense of humor from? I told her, I've just received it last night. She laughed again. Michelle was 5'6", 5'6" tall enough for the average woman. She has chocolate complexion with pretty white teeth, an oval face, and a beautiful shape on her rear end, round enough to stop any traffic on the street. Her breast size was 36 and her waist was 24 inches, shaped like a Coca-Cola bottle. Her hair was cornrow with a pair of nice diamond knob in her ears. She was casually dressed in a pair of blue jeans and a black t-shirt with the letters Jamaica written in green and yellow across her bubs. I asked her, what is your name and whereabout in Jamaica are you from? She looked at me in a strange way and said, how did you know that I am from Jamaica? I laughed and pointed to her stomach. She catches up to herself. She explained, my parents are from Jamaica, but I was born here in England. However, I grew up in Jamaica. Michelle eventually turned around the question to me. Where in Jamaica are you from? Spanish Town, I told her. I knew Spanish Town well, and then she said I have to go. I asked her for her mobile number. While I was inserting her mobile number into my mobile phone, I reminded her that she never gave me her name. She stretches out her hand and said, my name is Michelle, and what is your name, sir? I told her my name is Jim. Straight away, I dialed her phone number just to verify that the number she gave me was correct. Michelle realized that Jim was in deep thought. She asked, what's wrong? Something seems to be wrong. You're always crying and not talking to me. Are you not happy with me, Michelle? Then Michelle turned and looked at Jim and said, Jim, it's not you, it's me. There were times when I felt low and sorry for myself. And then there were times when I get very angry with people around me. And there were times I don't feel like talking. When I came in earlier, I felt that mood came up on me. I didn't want to speak to anyone. That was why when you asked me why didn't I return your calls, I respond, I don't know, with that attitude. Furthermore, you began to shout at me. That really upset me. I couldn't hold back the tears. I wish I could explain, but things were so confusing in my head. I am going to try and explain to the best of my ability. Michelle began to sob again. Jim holds Michelle's hand. He took out his handkerchief and wipes the tears from her eyes. He told her he loves her, and whatever it takes, he'll be there for her. He asked, shall I get you something to drink? Michelle said yes, and then she asked for coffee. He went to prepare the drink for her. While Jim was in the kitchen preparing the coffee, Michelle thought to herself, I have known Jim for some years now. Reminisces Jim was 5 feet, 10 inches tall, dark skin, well built, has a small pot belly which is not too big. I love his voice, not a coarse one, but a sexy one. He has the most gorgeous smiles. When he smiles at you, you could see his full sets of white teeth. He has been my best friend, and I have been able to talk to him about everything except this one thing, which affect my relationship in the past, she said. Jim came in and said, honey, here is your coffee. It's sweet, but not as sweet as you. Michelle continued her conversation as I was saying before you went to the kitchen. When I was 8 years old, I was molested by a family member. For the first time, Jim sprang up off the settee and shouted, what? Tell me you're joking. Who did this to you? Michelle paused. Jim said, pardon my expression. The reason why I shouted so loud was because I was so shocked. Then he said, sorry, come on, talk to me, honey. Michelle talked slowly with tears running down her face. My father was very domineering. He has some ways which I call controlling. If he doesn't get his ways, there would be an argument. I believe our father never loved us. My dad always spoke about us in a negative way, and he always pronounces pregnancy on us before time. When my older sister was getting married, my dad refused to attend the wedding, although he has suits to wear. Our dad would swear at us regular. The worst thing my dad could ever do to us was when my smaller brother fell off the country truck. Peter fell off the truck on a busy road. I was scared when I saw him lying in the middle of the road. I jumped off the moving truck and fell on the road also. The minute my legs touched the ground, I fell over and sustained some bruises on my body. I could have damaged myself worse, but all I was thinking of was my brother, whom was lying in the middle of the road. I didn't think the driver saw when he fell off the truck. He had cuts all over his body, likewise me. The truck driver eventually stopped the truck further up the road, and some people ran towards us. The passengers on the truck suggested that we should go to the hospital, but we didn't have any money, and that was the last transportation going to our father's home. When we got home, my father took the raw Dettol without diluting it and put it on our skins. It burned us. We were crying and wailing in agony. He just continued to use the Dettol on us. Michelle sobbed uncontrollable when she remembered what her father has done to them while they were kids. My father was a strange man. I believe he was in some cult or secret society. One day I saw him tie 3 dogs to a post, and then he beats them. When they started to bleed, he loosed them. They ran away. I don't know why he did this evil to the dumb animals. He never explained that to us. 2 days after that incident, my father and I went to the nearby farm to look for mango. We saw one of the dogs on the road. When the dog recognizes my father, it ran away. At age 5, we had chores to do in our home. I had to wash my own cloth. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone on the streets. My brothers would take back news to my mother, and she would ignore some of the news. But my father seems to make everything bothered him. He seems to fear that we may say something about his strange deeds. My dads always think that someone would harm us. We were not allowed to tell anyone our real names, except at church and school. We all had nicknames which we answer to. As a child, I was very unhappy and miserable. I used to keep a diary with all that had happened to me, but because I was scared in case someone found it, I would destroy it after reading it 2 or 3 times. I used to cry a lot, eat chalk, and bite my nails. I got involved in lots of activities such as volleyball and basketball. I did not want to get myself into trouble. If I didn't do well at school, my mother would punish me, and her method of punishing was beating. When we were in the home, we had to read books and be very quiet in the house. My mother had 10 of us, and she looked after us with not much support from our father. I can imagine how hard it was on her. She was strict, and I think whenever she gets stressed, she would shout and beat us for the simplest thing. My mother was always working to provide for the family, and to send us to school, she struggled to meet our basic needs. I used to wonder why Mom stayed with my father for so long. One day I had the courage to ask her why she stayed there so long. She told me that she felt if she did leave him and went with someone else, she thought they may abuse us. I used to feel very sorry for my mother and always try to do what she told me to do. I want to make sure that I didn't stress her out. 2 of my sisters were always at each other's throat. One particular sister always got beating from my mother. She was stubborn and would not listen to Mom. Whenever there is work to be done, she tried to avoid housework all the times. One of my sisters used to like studying, and she preferred to read than to help us in the home. This sometimes made it difficult for us, because my sister and I sometimes has to do all her work around the house to avoid getting my mother upset. Although my mother would beat us, my father never hit us, but he was verbally abusive to us. Until today, his word still lingers in my head, emotionally. Sometime I believe what he had said to us was true. I got negative feeling about myself, feeling low and depressed. Sometimes I felt that no one likes me, including you. I don't have many friends and finds it difficult to keep friends. My friends always thought that I was strange. One occasion I overheard Shirley, one of my friends, said, "I can't understand her. She was referring to me, and that is why I stayed away from her." This upset me so much that I started to think that all my friends are like her. Shirley. When I was 13 years old, I passed my exam and started to attend John Wassop Secondary School. My older sister Marsha was living in Spanish Town with her family. Her husband was a very nice man. He gave us a lot of jokes and always talking to us about the love of the Lord Jesus Christ. On Wednesdays evening, we went to prayer meeting at church. I was happy to leave the family home, lived with her. When I was 14 years old, I met and fell in love with this guy. He was 4 years older than I. He was a known bad boy in the community. The news was common that he has a gun one day. He showed me it. When my brother found out that I was talking to this guy, he tried to discourage the relationship under disguise. He always said my ex was a bad man and he is not good enough to be my partner. There were times when he would ask me not to say anything to my ex-boyfriend because he didn't want any trouble. The terrible experiences, my sisters went to the movie with her boyfriend and my older brother went out. I was lying down on the bed reading a book. Then my father came into the room. He sat on the bed next to me. And then he asked how I was getting on at school. Before I could answer, he touched me on my leg. I could remember I was wearing a short skirt he brought for me and a t-shirt. From that day, I stopped wearing short skirts. At the time, I didn't understand what he was doing, but one thing for sure, it was terrible. Michelle paused. Jim holds her hand and gentle squeezed it. My father touched my breast and my private part, Michelle said. He was playing with me, and then he took my knickers off. I could remember asking him what he was doing. I am going to make you feel good, he said. Then he had sex with me. This continued to happen for years. When no one was in the house, he would demand sex. I didn't know how to break the news to my mother as my father was so violent to us and threatened to kill me if I say anything to anyone. Sometimes my father would touch me in the most inappropriate places on my body. When I was in the kitchen or the sitting room, he would call me when I went to see what he wanted. He would ask me to get him some water to drink. I had always tried to avoid talking about my family with you or anyone for that matter. I don't know if you had noticed that, Michelle, as guess Jim. Jim's response, I have noticed that, honey, and one more thing I have noticed also is that whenever you have to visit your family, you didn't want to go alone. Whenever you talk to your family on the phone, it always ended into an argument which upset you a lot and you never wanted to talk. I felt that my mom didn't want any trouble, so she would keep quiet many times and allowed my dad to have his way within the house, Michelle said. My dad was a very strange man. I learned years later that he was a part of a secret society. He used to do some strange and weird things. I could remember he catch a cat, cut off the head, drain out all the blood into a drinking glass. He had a room in the house which supposed to be a room for one of us, but only my uncle and my brother was allowed inside that room. One day, I asked my brother, what do they do in there? He got angry. That is none of your business, he yelled. My brother used to look at me in a very strange way. Michelle started sobbing again. Jim said, honey, another day we will finish this discussion. They went to bed early that evening. Jim embraced her.